It's 12:15 here on 2CN.
Radio is everywhere with the people. Everyone listens to radio. Working girls listen to a favorite baritone.
Businessmen listen, relaxing at home.
Radio is everywhere with the people.
Through town and country, the programs flow.
Working people listen.
Business people listen.
Everyone listens to radio.
Well, our special guest today has been on radio for some 42 years. 42 years, still on radio now in, I think, 3UZ down in Melbourne.
Who's the guy with the twinkle in his eye? With the biggest, swingingest, and the singingest? It's John Vertigan. Who's the best on your transistor set? With the biggest, swingingest, and the singingest? It's John Vertigan. You'll hear the greatest platter stack from the JV record track.
It's a great big record show.
And it's all on 7/8. So let's go. Let's move along with the show. With the biggest, swingingest, and the singingest. Now we're all set to go. Time for the John Vertigan Show.
Oh, gee, it must be a great thrill, John Vertigan, to have a song written about you.
David, where did you get hold of that?
Oh, look, don't blame us, blame Wayne Mack.
Oh, Wayne Mack, of course. Yes. One of three people I know in Canberra. The other two are Ralph Bain.
Ralph from the ABC.
I worked with Ralph at 3UL Warrigal in Victoria way back in the 50s.
Did you really?
And Paul Langham over at Triple S. He does the racing there.
Yes, indeed.
Mm.
For heaven's sake, John. And, I mean, do you have a copy of that yourself at home?
Yes.
And play it all the time? Number one on the...
No, it's stashed away somewhere. Just, I leave it for my grandchildren. I'm sure they'll be thrilled.
Now, John, you met Ralph Bain on the way.
Yes.
Let's go right back with John Vertigan. Gosh, how many years have you... Is it 42 years, John?
42 and a bit. Yeah,
42 and a bit.
Last May, yes.
That must make you... I mean, that must be getting up there with among the record breakers, would it?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure that anyone is sort of...
tallied all those things.
Tallied it, yeah.
It's a long, long time.
I think there are a handful that have been in the game longer than me, but not necessarily continuous in commercial radio.
Yeah. So where did it all start, John?
Well, it all started when I was about 8 years old in Burnie in northwestern Tasmania, when the local radio station ran what was commonly known in those days as a children's program. There were children's programs, there were women's programs, and so on. And the children's program was usually around 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon for about an hour.
Right.
And we used to have our own little get-together in the studio at 7BU in Burnie called the Sun Polishers Club. And the theme was Jack Holbert singing Who's Been Polishing the Sun. And I was about 8 at the time. And also they had the Ovaltinis, and that was a syndicated Australia-wide program for kids.
Right.
And we used to congregate there on a regular basis and sing nursery rhymes and send Cheerios and all this sort of stuff, you know. But I was intrigued with the setup in the studio and the turntables and the microphones, and I was immediately hooked.
Were you?
One might say. Although at that stage I didn't ever dream that I would be good enough to be in radio. But as it turned out, when I was 16, I left school and got a job at 3GL in Geelong because we migrated.
Right. And was the actuality as good as the dream, John?
Oh, better.
Was it?
Better. Yeah, better. Well, it must have been because I've stayed in it.
Yeah, but I know a lot of people who stayed in jobs who don't particularly like them, so it doesn't necessarily follow, does it, really? But you've loved it.
Well, in radio, you either love it and have a love affair with it and stay with it, or you don't. Some people come and go, but a lot of people stay with it.
Yeah, so why what is so good about radio? What's been so good for John Vertigan in radio, John?
Because I've had the opportunity to do almost everything there is available to do in radio. I've written copy. I was a transcription clerk. Don't ask me what that is, because transcriptions no longer exist.
No, well, come on, tell us. What?
Well, they were the 16-inch discs, the vinyl discs, which were sent from Melbourne and Sydney to various stations around the countryside, containing all the serials, the plays, the Jack Davy shows, the Bob Dyer shows, Dad and Dave, you name it.
Yep.
And they were sent on these huge discs. And it was my job at 3GL, or one of my jobs at 3GL, to handle the receipt and dispatch of same.
Right.
And wrote a bit of copy, assisted with Peter's pals in the afternoon, and finally landed an afternoon shift where I played music and serials and so on.
Right. Now, Peter's Pals, what was that? Another one of, like...
Well, that was a national program, but it had its own local individual stations handling it. It was sponsored by Peter's Ice Cream, and Peter's Pals existed right around the nation on all the various radio stations. And you became a member and had your badge and took part in programs. We had drama, we had comedy, and music, and so on.
So it was a real community thing then, radio, wasn't it?
Absolutely, absolutely, because this is before television.
Yes. All right, John, so you got the afternoon spot, which was, what, drive time sort of thing?
Well, no, mid-afternoon.
Mid-afternoon.
I was only there for 3 months, but I remember it vividly because it was my first job, and you never forget your first position.
No, I guess not.
And, see, we migrated from Tasmania to the mainland because my late father was a journalist.
Yep.
He joined the Geelong Advertiser, so I was lucky to get a job at 3GL in Geelong.
Gee, weren't you?
He moved to Gippsland, to Yallourn, in fact, and I got a job at Warrigal, at a station called 3UL, and I stayed there for some 5.5 years. These days, of course, young fellas sort of flit from station to station over a period of 12 months or 18 months, don't they?
They certainly do.
Yeah, but we stayed. From there, I married and then went to Hobart on my honeymoon and got a job with 7HO. And that's where I first became a disc jockey.
Oh, right, so you were actually called a disc jockey in those days?
Oh, yes, yes.
Right.
The term was around, I think, in the late 50s, and that was about 61 when I went down there.
All right. Now, exciting times then as a DJ. I mean, were you geared to be a DJ, John? Were you the sort of DJ personality and type?
No, not necessarily, but I went along with the flow because, you know, I was listening to some of the talent in Melbourne and Sydney. I thought I can do as well as that, perhaps, and applied myself and got top ratings on the 7HO. I was known as Verti at 4:30. And coined such idiotic phrases like, in the pretty little city with the fountain and the mountain, you know. But that's behind me, thank goodness. I mean, they're those sayings.
Yeah.
I mean, I love Hobart, and I enjoyed my work there at 7HO. But that only lasted about 2.5 to 3 years. And got a job at 3UZ doing Midnight to Dawn. And worked with some wonderful people.
Like who, John?
Well, like Don Lund.
Oh, yes.
The late Don Rainsford. Alan Lappin.
Oh, for heaven's sake.
Jeff Haynes, the Hound. The late Bert Bryant was calling the races.
Yep.
John Russell, he was there. Jim Woody Wood, Bill Ackfield and Jackie Clancy. The late Dick Hemming. People like Tiny Snell. The late Clive Waters. John Ford was there. Noel Ferrier and Mary Hardy. Ken Sparks, Stan Rofe. Sam Anglesey, Grant Goldman, Jimmy Hannon, Johnny Chester.
Oh, blimey.
Bob Rogers, Ugly Dave Gray, Don Lane and Bert Newton.
There's no one left.
There's still a few more, but yeah, no, it was a great era. It really was. It was magic. It was really humming. The station was #1 by a mile, and we were doing the races as well.
Well, actually, we might just interrupt you there, John, to take you back to 3UZ days.
Oh.
Chocolate cream.
Calling the owner of Cortina car, registration number JHJ071. That's JHJ071. Your car has been spotted with a 3UZ car sticker on the window. Get yourself into UZ before 3 o'clock and you'll win a TATS ticket. And remember, your car isn't well dressed until it's wearing a UZ sticker.
The greater 3UZ brings you the time. The time.
On 8 minutes after 2 o'clock is Answer Day and A time. Come on, be a good egg. Get cracking and book your Answer Day and A Easter flight now so you don't miss out.
Take a stroll with a big food basket.
Oh, that was dreadful.
Oh, that...
That was awful. Was that tape running fast? if you operated like that now, you'd get the sack.
What about lines like "Get cracking"?
Oh,
Be a good egg and get cracking.
Yeah, we've always been punning. We always look after the punters and the punters.
Indeed, and also looked after the sponsors too there. This is the ABC, I should say, and we're talking to John Vertigan this afternoon on 2CN and our Souvenir Sounds of Australian Radio. Even the Time was sponsored back then.
Oh, everything that moved was sponsored. Oh, it's amazing. We do very little live commercials now, very few live commercials.
Right.
Unless somebody requests specifically for you to do.
Read, yep.
They're all pre-recorded now, all the ads.
Yeah, what about the people you work with? You rattle off dozens of them there, John. Oh, and did you learn from them? I mean, it's a silly question in a way, but what sorts of things do you pick up from people like that?
It's hard to put your finger on any one specific thing. One can only generalise and say that when you're working with professionals, like some of those I named,
yep.
It's bound to rub off.
Is it? Yeah.
And the atmosphere in that radio station was just unbelievable when you're working alongside people like that. You know, it's...
Everyone goes up a gear sort of thing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So what were your strengths, John? What, I mean, you were top rating. What was it you found easiest that came to you naturally?
Well, one thing is the read. I've always been able to read news. I did a stint on Radio Australia once doing the news.
Did you?
About 15 years ago. I like reading, interpreting, phrasing, selling. I hear young journalists read the news these days on radio and I wince.
Do you?
5% of the time, yeah. They're
Why?
emphasising the wrong words. And I know there'll be a few people out there that might say, good on you, Verdi, because they'll agree with me. The standard has gone down. The radio announcers used to read the news, and the journalists prepared it. But now the journalists are getting on and reading the news without any formal training as to how to do it properly.
Right, so you wince even today.
Oh, yeah, well, it's worse today than it was because trained announcers used to do the news once, and now they don't.
Yeah.
Only a handful of television presenters left who are not journalists. I'm not knocking journalists,
no.
But what I'm saying is that nobody is training them how to read news. Anyway, I'll get off my little soapbox now.
No, I enjoyed that, John. That was good. But we'll have the newsroom right down on our necks here.
You like me when I'm angry.
John, you also got in, of course, and well known now for your racing thing. You're a racing coordinator. Now, you can write on a grape seed what I know about racing and racing coordinators, but I believe it's a highly skilled thing which people wouldn't believe what went on in the studios while you're coordinating races.
Well, I learned from the fellow who went on to become the manager, Bob Cornish, at 3UZ in Melbourne. I learned it around 1968, 69 when I came off the mid-dawn and started to do other shifts. And he put me in there one Saturday afternoon as his assistant.
Right.
And then I was with him for a couple of years, and then he was elevated to being station manager and wasn't doing any air shifts at all. And I was landed with Saturday as a solo thing, and I started to really enjoy it.
Did you?
In those days, it was relatively easy. I mean, you only had 4 meetings on a Saturday. Now you've got anything up to 10.
Right. What year are we talking about, John?
Well, we're talking about the late 60s and right into the 70s.
Okay.
This proliferation of racing has only taken place in the last 10 years or so.
Right.
Now, on a Wednesday afternoon, I can cover up to eight race meetings.
So
when I say I can cover, we're coordinating or attempting to coordinate 8 race meetings, but of course the service is sort of not as good as it should be when you're only covering, say, 4 or 5.
Yeah. And physically, I don't know whether you can do this, John, whether you can sort of run us through what actually happens when you're coordinating races on a busy race afternoon.
If listeners can imagine sitting down listening to stereo headphones, that's virtually what you've got. You've got your air program on the left side, and on the right side you have a selection of all the incoming lines from the racetracks. From interstate and also local. Now, the interstate you can't control. You've just got to drop in on them. But the locals are listening to you, so take their cue from you on either a landline or a radio. It's a matter of getting on and getting off, especially on a busy day. We're also getting information fed to us vocally from a room outside where they're using the keyboard to call in all the stuff from the TAB. We're on direct line to the TAB computer.
Right.
And there's an operator out there who's collating information, feeding you vocally and also on a screen with all the readouts for openers and updates and tote dividends as they come to hand through the TAB computer.
So you couldn't afford to relax for a minute then, John, could you?
Oh, yeah. You learn to pace yourself, and if a trotting race comes on or a hurdle and you've got a chance to go and get a cup of coffee or whatever you have to do. And, you get used to the distances of races, and you know when you can leave the studio and perform a little task or get a cup of coffee, or when you don't leave the studio.
Right, yeah. But I'm just thinking, I mean, I'd be hopeless now, but I mean, Baldy, when he talks to me through the headphones here and I'm concentrating on what's going out there and looking at the screen too, that's only with one line coming in. When you've got several coming in...
Look, other racing coordinators would know what I'm talking about when I say you really become accustomed to all the extraneous noises and all information coming in one ear and coming in the other ear at the same time. You do get used to it.
Well, you certainly did. John, are you a racing man?
No.
You're not?
No, I don't follow the races. I only ever get to go to the races probably once a year, and that's down to Warrnambool when we take the sponsors down on the train. And I have a very pleasant social day, and I might have a bet then, but normally I don't bet. I don't have a phone account.
Go on.
I don't have time to bet. I remember one coordinator, and he was interstate, and I won't name him, and I don't know if he's still doing it, but he was onto his SP or his TAB account all afternoon while coordinating the races, and stuffed it up.
Oh, really?
You've really got to concentrate. You can't be on the phone all the time, you know.
Yeah. What about family, John?
Family? I have a wife. Yep. I have 4 children and 5 grandchildren and 2 dogs. And 2 dogs. They're the only ones at home at the moment. The rest have all left us.
Oh, have they?
Married and all that sort of thing, you know. And I have a son whose name is Jonathan, so gets called John for short, and he is a radio announcer, and a very good one.
Whereabouts?
He's at 3SR in Shepparton.
Is he really?
I'm very proud of him.
Oh, yeah, really? Yeah. What about your dad? Was he proud of you? Because he being a journalist, did he sort of...
Oh, he thought it was a bit strange to go into this radio caper. He said, son, why don't you get a real job? Oh. But after a while, after a few years, he realised that it was a career path that I'd taken and I was enjoying and I was achieving.
What about highlights or memorable moments in your radio career, John?
Highlights. Yeah. I was very privileged and thrilled to receive an award 7 years ago from the Victorian Club, which is the Bookmakers Club here in Melbourne, who present this annual Cox Plate Eve luncheon. Yep. And I received the inaugural award for services to racing.
Oh, did you?
It's an annual thing now.
Right.
That luncheon's coming up shortly, and I shall be there again. I received the Footlighters Sports Award about 2 years later. One of the happiest things I consider as a highlight of my career was not directly involved in broadcasting, but was organising a 3UZ reunion. And that happened March last year.
Right.
And we had about 200 people arrive. I spent many, many months trying to track down people and making phone calls, and we had a very successful reunion of 3UZ people who worked at the old premises at 445 Burke Street in Melbourne, not at the new premises.
Right, wonderful. What about lowlights, John?
Lowlights, in 1985, I had to leave a radio station and go out on my own for 12 months. And that's when I started doing some freelance work for Radio Australia and voiceovers, mainly for stations as far down as Geelong and in around Melbourne. And then I went back to the radio station and resumed after 12 months.
I see.
I won't name the radio station, I won't name the man who sacked me.
Okay, fair enough. What's your pet hate about your job? Apart from new newsreaders, John.
My pet aversion, I guess, is when you've got 8 race meetings and there's one race meeting at Whoop Whoop somewhere or another, and the starter nonchalantly looks at his watch and finds out that they're on starting time, so he says, well, we better move them in, and takes 3 minutes to do so.
Oh.
That can be very frustrating, especially when you have a very tight schedule and people are not realising that there's racing around the nation every 5 minutes and they just don't adhere to time.
John, do you mind me asking you how old you are?
Not at all. Now, how old am I? Hang on. I was 16 when I started in radio, and I've been in radio 42 years.
Okay.
So I'm nearly 60. I'm 59.
59.
Yeah.
It's funny how voices are timeless then, aren't they? Because if I was sitting there listening, it's...
Voices and eyes.
And eyes, are they?
Yeah, but eyes last longer, I think.
Geez, mine aren't doing too well, I'll tell you. So you'll be around for a while yet then, John?
Well, I hope so.
You hope so?
Yes.
Unless you strike the same man again.
I don't necessarily want to retire at the mandatory age of 65.
No.
I know a few race callers that are getting toward that age, and they have no intention of retiring. While I can still function, I mean, if I start to go whoopsie and forget things and make mistakes, sure, I'll give the game away. But while I'm still able to carry on the way I am, I'll continue to do so.
All right. I mean, who's your favourite race caller then?
Oh, well, I can't really make favourites, can I? I work very closely with Brian Martin. I've known Brian since he was a young caller, and I've watched his career develop and blossom.
Okay, what about radio announcers?
Radio announcers?
Yeah.
Nice old-fashioned term, isn't it?
Yeah, well, yes. Well, we don't... Well, presenters is what's the fashionable term at the moment, I think, isn't it?
I really don't have time to listen to the radio very much. No. I certainly don't listen to our own station very much because when you're working there, you want to sort of get away from it to charge your batteries up.
Yep.
I listen to a bit of talk radio.
Do you?
The ABC. I like music of all forms.
What was the last CD you bought, or last record?
The last CD I bought was, I had it imported. I had the original soundtrack on 33 and a third LP, and it got worn out, and I got an imported copy of the soundtrack of the movie Around the World in 80 Days.
Oh, for heaven's sake!
Yeah,
really?
That was the last one I bought.
Right, so that style of music's...
I like all sorts of music except grand opera and barbed wire stuff that you often hear on FM radio these days.
And do you go to shows, John?
No. Don't go out much, really. I'm a bit of a homebody.
All right. Well, John Vertigan, it's delightful to know a little bit more about you and your career. And it's been lovely for you to be our guest this afternoon on 2CN.
Well, it's been a delight for me too, David. I've really enjoyed it. And hello to Ralph Bain and Paul Langer.
My word, we'll pass those on for you.
Okay.
Thanks a lot.
That's been a pleasure.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Our special guest this afternoon on the Souvenir Sounds of Australian radio, John Vertigan.
John Vertigan.
Get a little more from your drive home.
We're going to the UK to speak to Ed Doolan.
Oh, Tony Blair, 93%.
Mr. 93%.
And the other 7% are clearly mental. Well, yeah, but for the French, who cares? Not as if it's a real country. Don't be silly.
All right.
Oh, I forgot I'm in Canberra. To the French embassy, that was just a joke.
They're listening, Ed. They're very nice at the French embassy.
Each weekday afternoon from 4, Alex Sloan wraps up the news and events of the day, here on Canberra's 2CN.
And here on Canberra's 2CN, it's time for you to get into the hat again, and this time you can get involved.